Okay, for this video, I wanted to go over circumstances when an LLC that's a partnership needs to actually file a return. And the reason I want to address this is time and time again, I get new clients that say, oh, well, I set up this LLC with my brother or my friend last year, and we didn't do anything with it. Do I still have to file a return? Well, the answer is maybe. Yeah, very likely you do. So let's look at the instructions in the Form 1065 and then look at the Treasury regs and Internal Revenue Code and some examples just to illustrate why it is so important to not set up entities and just kind of forget about them. So the instructions very clearly state that every domestic partnership has got to file a 1065 unless it has no income nor did it incur any expenses during the year for federal tax purposes. And so further down the list, we can see there that's a reference to the actual code section. So Internal Revenue Code 6031A, every partnership's got to file a return listing the gross income and any deductions that are allowed under federal tax rules. And then the Treasury regs go into a little more detail and say, look, if a partnership has truly no income, no deductions or credits, then it does not have to file a federal tax return. And then they do carve out an exception for foreign partnerships. So if you have a partnership that, even if it has U.S. partners, if it is formed outside the United States and the partnership has no gross income, that's ECI, so that's effectively connected income, then you generally don't have to file. Okay, so that's really like the only exception. And this is important because I'm getting a lot of new clients that are not U.S. persons. So it's, let's say, two individuals that live in Germany and they want to form a U.S. LLC. They set up this LLC. By default, it's a partnership for federal tax purposes. It needs to file a partnership return. Even if you might not be owing any tax in the U.S., it's a domestic partnership because it's a domestic LLC, and so it needs to file a Form 1065 tax return. There's really no way around that. And the rules were written that way intentionally, right? The IRS wants to see tax returns, right? They have very few exceptions these days where you can get away with not filing anything at all. Okay, so let's look at an example here. So we have Bob and Jim form a Delaware LLC, taxable as a partnership. They've got $2,000 worth of expenses. There's the list of them there, legal fees, registered agent fees, and so on. And they have $500 worth of revenue. So their net loss is $1,500 at the partnership level. Do they need to file? Well, yeah, they do, because at a minimum here, they have some sort of gross income. If you have any kind of gross income, even if it's $1, it doesn't matter that the company lost money, right? The IRS, again, the standard is not, did you lose money or not during the year? Oh, if you had a loss, you don't have to file anything. That is not the case. And then in this example here, Sarah and Jane form an LLC. This is what I see more often than not, like I said at the start of this video. They form an LLC, they have $150 worth of expenses to set up the entity. So they had their $100 filing fee with Wyoming. They paid $50 to a registered agent in the state, right? That's all they incurred. And then they just sat on it and did nothing. So the LLC has $0 in revenue, but it's got the $150 in expenses. Do they have to file? And yeah, the answer is, well, they should. If you have, the old rules used to be, if you had no gross revenue and you had just some expenses, and you were okay with losing them, in effect, right? So the $150, if you file, you can allocate those across to the K1s, and then Sarah and Jane, when they do their personal tax returns, they can record the expenses on their tax returns and get the benefit of the deduction. If they decided that, well, we only have expenses and they're nominal, and we're just going to say, forget them. We're not going to report them anywhere on our personal returns. We're okay with losing them. Then maybe you can argue that you didn't have to file. Now, even in this case, I would definitely recommend filing. And so it's really two main reasons. Right. The first one is when you set up the LLC and you get your EIN, you're already on the map, so to speak, right? The IRS knows you have an LLC. They know it's a partnership. And when they give you your EIN confirmation notice, it clearly says on there, okay, based on how you responded during the application, you need to file a Form 1065 and it's got to be by such and such due date, right? So March 15th of whatever the following year is. So if you don't file a return, eventually they're going to send you a notice because they're looking for it, right? They're expecting you to file. When you don't file, even if it's all zeros on the return, it trips up a flag in the IRS's system, and then they start asking questions, and that's what you do not want. And so the last item there is just avoiding the penalties. So if it turns out that maybe you did have some activity and you had to file and you forgot, the penalty is $210 per month per partner that it's late, up to 12. So if you've got a 2-person partnership, 3, 4, as the number of partners goes up, you can see that this penalty ratchets it up, pretty quickly. It's not uncommon for, thousands of dollars to be assessed for late filing these partnership returns. So just save yourself the headache and the additional costs and do the 1065 filing. Okay, so in this example, so we just did that one, right? So in this example, it's the previous example, but a little bit of twist, right? So in this one, Sarah and Jane, they form the same Wyoming LLC. They have $150 of expenses, no revenue, right? But during the year, the LLC opened a foreign corporation subsidiary, right? So they have a parent company on top, that's the LLC, and then underneath, a 100% owned foreign corporation that's a subsidiary. Could they still get away with not filing the 1065? In this case, absolutely not, because as soon as you add that foreign sub, you create a litany of other reporting obligations that you need to comply with. The big one is, with this foreign subsidiary, you now have a controlled foreign corporation. A controlled foreign corporation, you need to attach a 5471. There's all these schedules and then pages have to go along with it, and it's quite a lengthy filing process. The other problem is the 5471, if you don't file it, so if you don't file a 1065 that includes it, the penalty is $10,000 per year. 10 grand for just not even filing this thing. And that would apply even if there's no activity going on in the entity. So if the company lost money, if the foreign corp had even just, let's say, $100 worth of assets, just $100 in cash sitting in a bank account down there, it doesn't matter. The penalty still applies. And then the other item, an additional form, 926, that's used to disclose any kind of cash that was transferred to a foreign corp in exchange for stock. So when you form a foreign corporation subsidiary, normally in that first year, you're doing not only the 5471, but the 926 form. And failing to file the 926 form is also a $10,000 penalty. And then last but not least, they're our favorite, the foreign bank account reports. So FBARs are filed by U.S. persons, that includes individuals and entities, U.S. entities that have signature authority over or beneficial ownership over a foreign bank account. And so if the foreign bank account gets to a certain dollar value during the year, you might have to file an FBAR. And again, the penalty for not filing that is usually it's $10,000 per item that wasn't filed, or it can be as much as 50% of whatever the account value is of the account. So the penalties are massive. The takeaway here is, look, if you set up an entity and it's a partnership, just be prepared to file the form. Go ahead and file it, even if it's zeros, because it'll keep the IRS off your back and it'll help you avoid a lot of these additional penalties that could come into play. So that covers it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Happy to answer them. And appreciate a like and a subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate the support, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.